Hey guys, what is going on? It is Preston here from the Legendarium. Welcome to episode number 12 of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Actually, today's going to be a 60-minute interview. We've got a double episode for you today. I sat down with Artie Cabrera, didn't know where the conversation was going to go, and it ended up going for about an hour. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the next 60 minutes with Artie Cabrera. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Thank you for joining us today, Artie Cabrera.
Hey, Preston.
For those who don't know anything about you, why don't you tell them kind of who you are and what you do?
Well, for one, I live in New York. I'm a writer, musician, graphic artist to a degree. I'm a professional tortured soul. I don't know. Like, again, I told you, I warned you earlier, this was not going to work.
That's all right. We'll just move on.
Okay.
So you've been featured. One thing about you is you have a couple stories out there. You have I'm Not Dead, and then you also have two shorter stories that were featured in the Future Chronicles. How did Samuel Peralta find out about you, and how did you get invited into the Future Chronicles?
Well, I'd say about... this was earlier last year, 2015. Christopher Bohr, right?
Yes.
Well, he made the connection. I guess he really liked the I'm Not Dead story, and he made that little link between me and Sam. Sam's liked what he saw, and he extended the invitation, which was really cool, and that was for the Cyborg Chronicles. And so... that for Cyborg Chronicles, I wrote Johnny Rangers. I don't know if you read that particular story.
Not yet. It's on my list.
Okay, so I did okay with that, and then he asked me to I asked him if I could write for Alt.History 102.
Okay.
Because I had Diablo Del Mar sitting on my desktop, and I had no place to put it, and I thought it would be ideal to let him see it, and he was cool with it, and handed it over to him, and that's where it landed.
So on your Diablo Del Mar, it says when you released it, after it was in Alt.History, that it's part 1. When can readers expect part 2?
Well, right now I've got like 5 projects working at the same time. Like, there's a lot of wheels turning at the same time, and so as you know, we're working on the B-Movie Anthology.
Yes,
with a bunch of cool kids. I've got the sequel to Dudley in my. I have a folder on my desktop that's just like so crazy. It's got like 1 million of files in there. So I got Dudley working. I got the sequel to Diablo Del Mar working. I got the sequel to Rangers working. I was actually working on Jurassic Chronicles, but I had to pull out, unfortunately, because I had like a last minute moving situation I had to kind of deal with. So I feel bad about that. So
speaking of your B-Movies anthology that you mentioned, Paul Schwartzstrom would like to know why the love for B-movies.
Well, growing up, I watched a lot of movies that were like inappropriate for my age. So I mean, like, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, any parents or whatever, but in my household, like, we were just so like, there was a lot of art happening, a lot of movies, like huge, like movie fans and music fans in my household growing up. And we just watched everything. I mean, especially growing up in the 80s, where I was watching a bunch of stuff from the 70s, a lot of stuff from the 50s and the 60s and so on and so forth. So I guess maybe that has something to do with why I love it so much, because it reminds me, obviously, of my childhood. But not only that, but it's a lot of that stuff you don't see anymore because of how movies have changed, and even literature has changed. And I love Pulp Fiction because of the language, and so I don't know, I just have like this certain attachment to it. And because I don't see a lot of it anymore, I kind of want to recreate it. You kind of like when they say write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like really familiar to me. It's just a playground. Like I see it as like a huge playground that a lot of people don't play in anymore. And I kind of want to go there, you know?
Right. So speaking of the different, I guess, genres, you can say, you have the I'm Not Dead, the Johnny Rangers you talked about, and Diablo Del Mar. So you've kind of got a wide range of genres you've written in. You've got science fiction, you've got horror. The Johnny Rangers has been described as kind of a YA crime, cyberpunk, space book. Where do your different inspirations for these come, since you're kind of not focused on one genre?
Well, that's because I have ADD.
Right.
And I can't focus on anything. So my brain just like wanders, and my imagination is just like, it's always on. It's always like work. And it's annoying sometimes, because sometimes you just want to tune out, and you get all these ideas coming to you and they're nagging. And because, like I said, also growing up in a household where I got to see a lot of different movies. I mean, I grew up watching especially gangster movies, violent movies, horror movies, pulpy movies, like just reading a lot of different comic books of that era. So I have a lot of different tools in my toolbox that I can, you know, I choose to play with something. I can just go and, you know, like, hey, I want to like if I want to write like a sci-fi story, like Johnny Rangers, that came from me reading a lot of Mickey Spillane books growing up too. So, but I wanted to twist that into like a future thing, which has been done. It's kind of like just like a Dick Tracy in space type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to do it in a way that was more adult. Like there's things I like, but then I look at it and I say, I wish that had more bad words in it, or like nudity. It's a bad thing. That's a bad way of thinking. But I just wanted to put like my own like twist to it.
Gotcha. So of the genres you've written in so far, what's your favorite one to write in?
Well, I have a different experience with each thing that I write, so it's never like the same experience. With I'm Not Dead, that was just like that was purely when I wrote I'm Not Dead, it wasn't me trying to write a book, because I wasn't a writer yet. I wasn't thinking like I'm going to go out and write a book. I needed a creative outlet, because I wasn't making music anymore.
Okay.
And I had all this like pent up stuff going on. And I've always wanted to write a story, even as a kid. But I want to write like, you know, at the time I didn't realize that there was such a saturation of zombie stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to write a zombie story as if one of my favorite movie directors wrote it, like Martin Scorsese or Brian De Palma or Francis Ford Coppola.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something like this, where it's not just like, excuse the pun, a brain dead zombie story. You know, like I wanted it to be heavy. I wanted it to have substance. I wanted to have like real people problems. You know, so if you haven't read I'm Not Dead, right? I don't want to assume that you did. Okay. It's tricky, because it's at face value. You look at it and you're like, oh, okay, this is just another zombie book. But when you get into it, it's about the main character, Charles Dudley, and his life. And his life is pretty screwed up, because the things that he's been through with his like family, and then like marriage, and just substance abuse. So it's like, it's just a different take on the genre in general. So when people read it, it's like, this is not what I was expecting. And that's not a pat on my own back. That's just, I don't know. It's just, I also inject a lot of my own personal experiences into the story. And that's what it really was. It was more like a diary, but skinned with a zombie story.
So you said that before you wrote that, you were kind of writing music and stuff. What type of music did you write?
I was in a rock band since I was 15.
Okay.
So I was writing a lot of music. You know, I was for the most part, I was a lyricist, songwriter for my band, and so starting to write a story wasn't that difficult, because I wanted the story to be more like writing a story. I knew it wasn't going to be like the greatest American novel, because so I'm like, so the attitude that I took with writing that story, and I didn't want to write an entire book. I wanted to write like 10 pages. I just needed to get it out of my system. But the more I wrote, the more it grew. And I'm sitting there, and this was before KDP and all that junk. And I had just come out of the music business, and I didn't want to have to go through the whole like, oh, okay, if I get involved in doing this, I don't want to go hunting for literary agents and trying to sell. This is something that I wanted to do for myself and maybe share with a couple of my friends and let them dig it. It wasn't like I wasn't really, I don't want to say I wasn't taking it seriously, because I was, but it wasn't what the intent of I'm going to become an author and I'm going to start writing books. It's just this little seed that I needed to plant and let grow just for the hell of it.
So what made you decide to eventually self-publish the story? What inspired you to decide to go after being an author?
Well, like I said, so the story just kept on growing because I really just wanted it to be a blog. Like I said, it's just something I needed to get out. And eventually what happened was the story just got long enough that it did become a book. And this was right around the time when KDP was on the radar. Like it first kind of started appearing, and then I messaged Hugh Howey, and this was before he was like Mr. Big rock star guy. So, and I'm like, because I'm looking at him, I'm like, this guy is obviously doing things. So you got to talk to the people who are doing things, who are making traction. So I hit him up, and he's like, well, talk to this editor, and that's a whole story in itself. But then along the way, I hooked up with the beta reader, Charla. And Charla was a blessing in disguise, because when she read my story, it's pretty much like reading a bowl of alphabet soup. It was just like really crazy, and had all the scars, and like it wasn't grammatically perfect because I was just like writing away at it. And it took about a year and a half where it finally formed into a book. And then that's when I'm like, wait a minute, so there is an outlet where I can put this out. And I didn't care about the whole like I need to be published by like whoever. I want to put this out because it's just a cool, like a thing I wanted to do. And so I put it out, and people actually read it and liked it, which is a shocker to me, because I was just like, man, I'm going to put this on. People are just going to think it stinks, right? Because it's just, that's not me like, poo-pooing on it.
Right.
It's just, but knowing that I'm putting out this thing that's not like, put out by a professional publishing company or whatever. It's scarred, and it's got like whatever. And the point I was trying to make before is I approached it like as if I was like a punk band, like writing a book out of the garage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of attitude I wanted the book to have. Even if it was like flawed and imperfect, I want the book to have an energy to it. And I want people to read it and go, oh my God, like this is not the greatest book, but holy crap, it's heavy.
Right.
And it's emotional, it's raw. And I think I kind of pulled it off. But what happens after that is like I'm like sitting there going, okay, I did this, and then you get cocky. You're like, I can write all the books now. Yeah, I can write 10 more books, and that's not kind of like not what happened.
Right.
So from there, I pulled back and I started writing things, but I didn't rush to publish stuff because I wanted to learn the craft.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, that was fun. Now let me actually kind of take this seriously.
Gotcha. So we've talked about I'm Not Dead a good bit. Why don't you kind of give people a book blurb on what I'm Not Dead is actually about?
Well, it starts out, the way the book starts out like right in the middle of the story, right in the action. But ideally, it's about, the main character's name is Charles Dudley, and he is going through a separation. And his family had just left, like his wife just took off with the kid. And now he's kind of like left amongst his own like vices. And so he's kind of like a man child, right? And he's a drinker and he's got ailments, so he's like kind of drugging it up, and he's just kind of going through whatever man-child problems like some of us guys have, sometimes. And just as that happens, the end of the world kind of like this, like an event that is a storm comes and pretty much starts turning people into like these zombie types. But they're not zombies. They're my characters are called deviants.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't want zombies, it's like if I'm gonna create something, I want my own thing. And deviants are different from zombies. They're a whole different whatever. So it's weird. It's not like it's so chaotic. You'd have to read it. It's more like an experience. Like you're gonna read it, it's just gonna like make you. But I love it. I mean, I think I did a really good job. And with the help of Charla, I drove her crazy because she's like, I have no idea what this book's supposed to be. It's not linear. It's chaotic, but it's heavy. And if you read it, you're going to get something from it. I don't know what, but there's enough in that book where you're going to walk away from it. You're either going to hate it because it's too crazy, or you're going to love it because it is genuine, and I put everything that I had into that story.
Gotcha. So what's the second story that you published after I'm Not Dead?
Well, I didn't publish anything for a couple of years. So the first thing that went out was Johnny Rangers for Sam, and Diablo was the third one. Okay. So that followed shortly after.
So what did you learn in that time span of I'm Not Dead to when you wrote Johnny Rangers? What kind of stuff did you learn that helped you hone the craft a little bit better?
You need editors.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I've said before, that there's two areas that I feel like indie authors should not skimp on, if you can, is the cover and the editing. You can have a gorgeous cover because we're all going to judge a book by the cover. They say not to, but we do. And then but you need to have a great cover, but you also need to have really good editing as well, because you don't want to open a book and then it just completely suck.
No, that we worked really hard on that story for a couple of reasons. One, I was a brand new, like I've never written a book before. Mm-hmm. And two, the story had no arrangement to it. Like if you read it, eventually, if you ever do read it, you'll see what I'm talking about. Like it starts in the middle, then it goes back to the beginning, then goes to the end. And at some point I try to get like really creative with the first edition I put out, and I had an intermission, and it was an entirely different story, but it was parallel. It was like something that was happening on the other side of town. And I'm like, of course I was told that it wouldn't work. And don't ever tell me that something won't work, because it'll force me just to do it, for some reason. Like, it's like that won't work. Well, even more reason to try, right?
Yeah, watch
this. Hold my beer, watch this. Yeah. So, so I threw the intermission in, and the reviewers were like, "What? This makes no sense." It's like, dude, man, like broaden your mind a little bit. Like, so anyway, so I took it out. I took that part. I took the intermission out, and I made it its own story. It's called Gangs of Ground Zero. And Gangs of Ground Zero I love the story. It's kind of like a Chinese gangster meets Godzilla story. And that I want to pair up with the audiobook when I finally do put it out. And I'd really like to put it out in September. Because it's just been way too long. And it's like super violent. It's cool.
Very nice. So we've talked online before, and one of the things we talked about is Metallica. So yes. I want to ask you a couple Metallica questions.
Yeah.
So if you could write a story based on any Metallica song, which song would you use and why?
Well, it's funny that you asked that, and I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did, because the sequel to Dudley is called Fades of Black.
Okay.
So that is more or less, initially I just called it Fates of Black because of what happens in the story. But then I heard the song, the Metallica song, and I'm listening to the lyrics. I'm like, oh my God, like it just kind of like adds up, they match. They're so connected, and so it just made more sense to stick to that title. So Fates of Black, which is what, couple of songs or one song?
One song.
Well, okay, Fates of Black. It's going to have to be Fates of Black.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's pick a second one since you've already written a story kind of on a Metallica song. If you could pick another one, which one would you do?
Well, to be honest, I'm not a huge Metallica fan.
Really?
I'm more like a Guns N' Roses guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I grew up. Yeah, Guns N' Roses is like my favorite band. Metallica is probably in the top 5.
Okay,
but I'm not fanatical about them because I only really got into them later on. Like I didn't really appreciate them so much later on. It's not that I don't like them; they just different. Like it took me a while to catch up with certain bands,
right?
That were like, when I was younger, I was like not into them. It was weird. I kind of flip flopped on some bands. I'm like, how did I ever like that band and like ignored this band because they're way better? Like I grew up because the era that I grew up in, we were just a lot of glam bands, and you had you had your Guns N' Roses, you had your Bon Jovi. I wasn't a Bon Jovi fan in particular, but I think Guns N' Roses was like safe enough because they weren't too girly like Poison, right? But they were hard enough, but not crazy. Like I don't know. So Metallica, I appreciate a lot more, and they have a new album coming out. I don't know if you've
it's heard. In November 18th.
Yeah, it's good for them. I'd like to be 52 and like cranking out music like that. It'd be great. I like to be 52 and doing anything.
Exactly.
How about this? I'd like to be 52 at some point. There
we go. One step at a time.
Right. So,
okay.
I mean, I'd like to be 52 and writing like I realize at this point I'm not super honed in on writing, but it's something that I'm totally cool with. Like if you were to tell me you're going to be spending the next 20 years writing stories, and that's great. But I also take things into consideration. It's like, I want to do music for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. That's what I've always wanted to do. But the industry changed so much that it almost became impossible to do music in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And you kind of had to relearn because the whole industry kind of restructured. And it's something I'm kind of concerned about with the literature world. I think it's going to go through the same.
Really?
I think it's yes, absolutely. Of course. And people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that things are going to be peachy and creamy. And no, it's like, I mean, if you look at how much KDP has changed in the last 4 or 5 years, mm-hmm. Just imagine how much more it's going to change in the next year. It might change for the better. It might change for the worse, but be prepared for the worst is what I'm saying. Because there's just so many people writing now. That's a little dangerous when you start saturating a market.
Right. So what do you see happening to the writing world?
I don't know. I want it. I don't ever want anything to change for the worse. That's what happens. It's like, I don't want to sound like sour grapes, but just to kind of like make the argument relative to what I used to do with music. Mm-hmm. And there was a time, in order to be a musician, you had to sit there and learn how to play an instrument for years. Right. And if your dream was to become a recording artist, you'd eventually get there if you stuck to it long enough. And then you get into an industry that's set up a certain way. Right. And you didn't have the MP3 and you didn't have the same technology that we have now, where it took me a good 5 or 6 years to become a comfortable musician, comfortable enough to say, oh, cool, I can go play with a band now, or I can go do a live gig or whatever. Because I always say that it's a good 5 years where you start to really start cutting your teeth. I think that's a fair amount of time to really just get into what you're doing and learn what you're doing enough where you can start branching out. With writing, I feel the same way. Like, I've only been really doing this for 5 years. I'm not that comfortable yet, but I know which direction I want to go into.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm watching it closely because I'm like, I just hope that it doesn't, like, I don't want to say it's going to detonate like the music industry did, Because it did. I mean, listen, when you do music for 20 years, like I did, longer than 20 years, and you kind of know how the system works, and then you're finally getting there, it turns on its head.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh man, there's no money like in the music. Then why am I doing this? Not that I didn't want to do anymore, but it's just become difficult because the market started to become saturated and the needs were different. Like all of a sudden you had no one wanted to hear a particular band anymore. They wanted to hear 1,000 Britney Spears and 1,000 Limp Bizkits. It started becoming manufactured.
Right. I remember when Kindles first came out. I was like, no way. They were so expensive. And I was like, I'm not paying that kind of money. I'd rather hold a physical book. I remember telling my wife, I was like, there's no way in the world I'm ever going to buy a Kindle. There's no way. I would rather hold a physical book, and there's no way this Kindle thing takes off. There's no way this ebook thing takes off. And yeah, I was proved wrong on that one.
Absolutely. But there's pros and cons to everything. Of course you're going to have resistance. Of course, like the purists are going to say, hey, I want to hold the calculator to read my book. Yeah. I like the feel of the page. I like, the feel of the book. Just like, I liked holding cassettes and vinyl and things like that. But then technology forces you into a direction where now you have to put all your music on this little pocket thing that holds 50,000 songs. That's a pro. But at the same time, you kind of do lose a quality to it, right? I mean, music lost a sound quality because of the coding and all that stuff, you lose a sound quality that a lot of people can't really hear. But if you know music enough, like you will notice that, like, wow, digital does not sound like analog, and paper doesn't read like digital. So you get that argument. I think it's good in some ways and bad in others. But my concern with the whole writing thing is that there's so many people doing it, and it's bursting at the seams.
Yeah. It gets hard to follow with all the indie people out there. Sometimes it can get pretty hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah, and I'm a little turned off to it because, not that I ever wanted this road to be easy for me. I don't want anything easy, because if nothing is hard along the way, then you cannot learn. If everything's just easy and everything's just like easy street all the way, and then you get to a point where it does get, you won't know what to do. So I think trouble is good.
Right.
But in this sense, like, I'm concerned because, 4 years ago when I first put Dudley out with no promotion, not a lot of like heavy legwork, I sold a considerable amount of copies, much to my surprise. And it was nice, and a certain amount of downloads or whatever. And then years later, I put out the same book, with a heavy promotional behind it, and like crickets. And it's because it's so competitive now, because everyone's putting out a book, which is fine. I'm not telling everyone to stop writing just so I can get ahead.
Right.
It's like, all right, stop doing what you're doing so I can no. But this is just the nature of the beast. When technology makes things easier for people, and it's like this in a lot of other industries too. It's like, with the DJing thing, when you were able to DJ a party with your laptop, that opened up the floodgates for a bunch of kids who were not DJs. They're just like, oh, I can do this and go play at a club tomorrow. It screws up the system a little bit. I think it does, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Like, I don't really focus on that, because no matter what you do, you always have to be I don't want to say ruthless. Aggressive is better. You always have to be on top of things no matter what happens in any industry, and you have to love what you do. That is most important, which is why I want to do this B-Movie Anthology.
Right.
Because it speaks true to what I like, to the art that I gravitate to, because, another thing is, like, people will tell you, write what's popular, write what's selling, do book covers that's going to sell. And I say, no. Why? Like, again, like, why would I want to do that? Like, I'm not scared. I have confidence in my art to know that I know what I want and I want to accomplish that, because otherwise, what am I doing? I'm going to go onto Amazon and look at the top 10 book covers and emulate that. No, thank you. I'm not going to write a story that's 50,000 other writers are writing at this time, so.
Paul Swartstrom also wants to know, what's your favorite B movie and how has the genre affected your writing?
Favorite B movie? Man, there's so many of them. I like The Blob because I just watched that recently, so it's kind of like the most recent thing. That's the first thing I just grabbed. It's just a giant jelly, like just rolling through town, sucking people up. How crazy is that idea? I mean, it's not like Godzilla, it's jelly. It's jelly from space. It's jelly from space, and it's just killing people and sucking people up. I mean, it's just so crazy, but it's a classic. How can you not love it? Right. Now, again, going back to why I like B movies, because in the 50s and 60s, when people were writing a lot of the space stories, the science wasn't complicated. Ray guns, and spaceships, they were like pretty like basic in design and the language, and where I think now a lot of people who are writing science stories, and this isn't a dig, this is not a dig, so if anyone hears this, don't call me because I'm not trying to be one, but I like the simplicity, of those stories, and they're fun because I think first and foremost the story has to come first before anything else, right? And The Martian is a good example of that. It's got a good balance because the character is appealing, right? But when it came to growing potatoes, that part of the story did nothing for me. And it's unique in the way that it was written, and I can see how people can like that because it's nerdy, it's smart, it's intelligent, which I'm kind of like not too bright sometimes. So it's lost on me, right? I just want to know how he gets across the planet. Right. Is he, that's the part that sticks with me the most. It's like, a day or two after reading the story, I'm not like, oh, I should grow potatoes now that I know how to. Because I've got the formula. That part is lost on me. I like the characters, and I like the story. I like the simplicity and of this guy's trapped on Mars. Now he's got to get to Earth. Yeah, and that's at the core of it. That's why I like. So
it's kind of funny you mentioned a simple story. It's just the simplicity of it. We went and saw Pete's Dragon the weekend that it came out. Disney redid it, and that story is so simple. This kid gets in a car wreck with his parents. Parents die. He's stuck in the woods. And a dragon finds him and raises him. Then 6 years down the road, he gets discovered, and then people want to try to capture the dragon. And then it's all right, let's rescue the kid and the dragon, and then the story's over. It's a simple story.
Right. Let's not confuse simplicity with dumbing things down.
Right. That's true.
Different.
Yeah.
Because you can dumb things down and it feels insulting. Like, really? Like, okay. But simplicity can also be graceful, in a way. Like Jaws. Jaws was a bunch of guys on a boat, and you never saw the shark, but you had these dudes who had to hang out with each other, and you got to hear each of their stories, and it wasn't didn't get all crazy technical, but it was an amazing freaking story.
Right.
Simple, amazing. I read Jurassic Park recently, and I love dinosaurs. I love Jurassic Park, the movie. I read the book, and as soon as they started getting into DNA sequencing and all that stuff, I had to skip over it because it's like, what am I doing with this information right now? How does this information help me? It's not. I'm not going to grow dinosaurs, but and I'm not saying, again, I don't want people to think I'm being and I'm not. It's just because people can read that and they'll go, oh, hey, something will trigger something in them and they can relate to that stuff. It won't for me. And when it comes to basic storytelling, I think simpler is better, maybe, because every story has a basic structure to it, right? So you can't really break the structure because then it gets too weird. And I don't know. Like, I don't know where I'm going with this. I just know that when I sit down to write a story, I just know when I sit down to write a story, it's like, how can I make this fun, but at the same time, kind of like get a couple jabs in, and like with Diablo, I just got a review recently where people were calling me out on accuracy, and I'm like, why are you reading like stories? Like, are you like, why are you holding up scoreboards? You know what I mean? It's a fantasy, it's a fantasy story, like Star Wars. Like, I mean, I know actually not everyone loves Star Wars, but I'm sure you're a Star Wars fan, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not hardcore, but I like them. Okay,
so Star Wars, like, let's just take the first movie, okay, and The New Hope, were the very first Star Wars movie.
Okay.
A 5-year-old can watch that movie, not get lost. It's very simple, right?
Right. But
later on, if you really want to get deeper into the story and you get into the whole political background of that story, and as a 5-year-old won't realize it's there because it's not the most focused part of the story, but it's there, but they don't like dwell on it. They don't shove it in your face. And I think that's the problem with the prequels, because they did that. They kind of lost what made the original stories good, because it's like, they're shoving all this political craziness on you and whatever. It just got too crazy with explaining how things worked and the midi-chlorians. And, as a Star Wars fan, I don't need to know how the lightsaber works. I don't need to know about the crystals. You know what I mean? I don't need to know those things. That's great for a purist. If you really want to delve and get crazy deep into the story, that's fine. But on a basic level, you don't need to know those things, And that's just might be me, because I'm a little more of a caveman, I don't know. Like, I just like simpler things, and that's why I like to do stories, and that's why I like to accomplish with the B-movie thing, because when I want people to read this anthology and not think too much. I don't want them busting vessels in their brain, like reading over sciencey, hard science and crazy language. I want people to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it comes down to. I think in any form of entertainment, you need to have fun, so that's it. I mean,
do you have a writing lineup or an author lineup for the B-Movie Anthology? Who's going to be in it?
Yeah, I kind of changed along the way for reasons I can't talk about.
Okay.
But so far, Ellen Campbell is our editor.
Okay.
Who else? Forbes West is writing the story.
Mm-hmm.
The Swordstrom brothers are contributing stories. John Lucas. If I'm forgetting people again, it's just because I'm like, whatever. But no, I don't want just anyone write. Not everyone can write this style of story. Just like I can't write, Samuel Peralta, right? He's got his Future Chronicles, and bless him, man, the guy is killing it right now, right?
Right.
I mean, his books are rocking. But I, from what I understand, he's got a certain readership that kind of expect, like, they're like a higher brow, like they're more intellectual, right? They want that's just me. That's just what I think is happening, right? So it's like I can't write that way. I can't write that hard science stuff. I can't write that intellectual, those intellectual stories, like those deep thought provoking stories. I can't do that because that's just not who I am. And I feel kind of guilty sometimes, because it's like, man, I should be able to write coherent stories, right? But I can't, because that's just not how my brain works. And that's why, I'll produce a story like Johnny Rangers, that's just ridiculous. And Diablo Del Mar has a sense of craziness to it that people will read it and it'll turn them off. And I'm okay with that, because knowing what I'm capable of doing, like a story like Diablo Del Mar, I mean, not to spoil anything, but I take so many liberties with history and where he ends up at the end, it's like if you're a purist and you're like a historian and you're a hardcore historian and like you know like how what really happened, you're gonna read this and go, God, this guy's so full of shit. Who's this writer? He sucks. Right? He sucks. Like, what's he doing? Like, Christopher Columbus ends up on an alien planet with in some kind of time portal. People are going to hate that because some people cannot bend their minds to having that much fun.
Drew Avera wants to know, what is your writing process? Do you outline? Do you type or use dictation?
No.
No.
No. How do I write? It's simple, but it's not simple. I'm not one to sit there and like I see a lot of writers on Facebook who are like, hey, guess what, guys? I just banged out 20,000 words today. What? Like, how do you have that much? Like, how are you that prolific? Or you can just write 20,000 words. And I guess in time, you can do that. I cannot do that. I hang on every word, sentence, and to me, it's a lot about like the vibe. Like sometimes I'll just be like making a sandwich, and I'll say something to myself. And go, oh, that character would say that, and I'd have to go write it. But I cannot sit there. I don't have like a schedule where it's like I gotta be up 6 a.m. and do my yoga and drink my tea and write for 16 hours. I can't do that. That's just not how I function. But I do write. Like if I have a good chunk of story, I will sit there and write it. But I cannot force a story, And it's like, I don't think that's how it works. It should work, but I'm not everyone else. Other people can sit there and bang out like a 50,000 word novel in 2 weeks. Because this just comes to them. Maybe they're like some kind of conduit or something.
Right.
That's not me, dude. I cannot do that. Like, it's, to me, the reason why I want to write Diablo is because I'm like, I had this idea of like, it was like kind of like an extension of an article I read when I was researching for Dudley, where Christopher Columbus kind of said that he saw a thing in the sky, and they're saying it was a UFO, right? And I'm like, man, that would be cool. Like, who's writing stories like that? No one. And I am a firm believer in write what you want, and if it inspires you, not inspires, it's kind of like a corny word, but if it like gets you excited, just write it. And that's why I'm like, I can't sit there and be like, well, this month space romance is in, so let me go write that. That sucks. That's such a bad attitude, let me tell you. That is such a hard freaking attitude to have. It's like, I don't know what to write. Well, what's famous now? What's popular now? That sucks. I hate that. I cannot tell you how much I hate that way of thinking. I hate it.
So do you outline your stories, or do you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants?
No, I do. Maybe I'll do a page. Sometimes I'll do 2 pages, but I won't have the whole story. Like with Rangers, I didn't have the end of the story till like 2 days before I had to hand it in to Sam.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. I had no idea. I'm like, oh, cool. This is how the story's going to start. And then 3 months later, when like the deadline's like looming over, I'm like, oh crap, I don't have an ending. And I just wing it, but somehow it just works out beautifully. And the same thing would happen with Diablo. And not to get too like bummed out or whatever, but my dog passed away in December.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not your fault. But so yeah, but it was just a real downer because it was like Christmas. My dog's dying. I had to write the story for Sam. I had to finish Diablo. And so I'm going through this grieving period, right? And it's 2 days where I had to hand my story into the editor, and I'm like, I'm trying to be like quirky and funny, and it was so hard. Because I'm like my dog just died like 2 days ago, and I'm like trying to like figure out how to have fun with the story, and I pulled it off, somehow. I don't know. I think it's just you got to love what you do. You have to love what you do, and I love writing stories. I don't pay too much attention to the system and what other people are doing, because that's a trap. That's a huge freaking trap. because you kind of jinx yourself. Because here, and this is something that I will always tell everyone. If, let's say, years ago, like, everyone started writing Twilight style stories or Harry Potter style stories because it's so big, and a lot of people start writing like wool type stories because it's like, oh my god, Hugh Howey's a millionaire and blah blah blah, and that's I'm gonna do what he does, and they start writing a lot of the fan fiction, and a lot of people do it. A lot of people doing it are genuine about it, and I think a lot of people do it because they just want to freaking kind of cut the line. You know what I mean? As a thing to do. But if I'm going to spend a year, 6 months or 2 years writing a story, it has to be something that I'm going to be proud of 5 years from now. I don't want to look back on something and say I did that because it was trending for a month. You understand? Like, I mean, is that wrong of me to say?
Not necessarily.
Well, listen, you can tell me I'm wrong. I'm not always right, man. I'm not always right. Sometimes I got rocks in my head, and it's okay. I'm just speaking my mind,
That's fine.
I like art. I like this is what I'm looking for. And going back to the B-movie thing, I want artists to rebel again. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I want artists to be rebels again and not pay too much attention, not holding their finger on the pulse too much because they're scared to take risks.
So I guess speaking of artists taking risks, I guess it's kind of a risk. Are you following Michael Bunker's his Patreon story that he's writing?
Yeah.
So are you looking for stories kind of like that? How there's kind of a slight controversy with that story?
Controversy makes cash. People love controversy. And we're in an era where people are just too freaking careful, And listen, you can't. I mean, you have to know that there's certain books out there like Catcher in the Rye that people, when it first came out, people were like, "This is such a bad book, burn it," But how many years later, and it's considered a classic. I think with art, you have to sometimes piss people off, And I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying that it's okay, but it adds flavor to the soup of creativity. That's just me. And again, like whatever Bunker's doing, he's got his reasons. I'm not going to justify why he's doing them, but there's people paying attention to it, and there are people talking about it. And whether you're up in arms or you're fine with it, he's making people engage in a conversation.
So Tracy Mullen McCall, she wants to know, what books do you think high school kids should have to read for mandatory reading in school?
Okay, well, there's two answers to that. I didn't read in high school and I dropped out. Okay. So I'm the give me another one. See, that's a bad question. I dropped out of high school, and not because I was a lazy bum. It's just because I almost got shot. But that's a whole different story. So yeah,
a bunch of people want to know, why do you need avenging? What does avenge me really mean? And who has avenged you the best?
So the whole avenge me thing, I didn't create that, so I'm not like that brilliant, but where that came from is from taking something that is so like trivial and stupid and making it like turning into something really dramatic. Like if you read my post and it's just like, oh, I went to the supermarket today and they didn't have my favorite fruit juice, avenge me. It's like stupid. Like, and that's kind of a play on what I see other people doing on Facebook. It's like they take these little things that kind of don't mean much and they make it so dramatic. So it's just me being a douche.
Right. Okay.
But the best avenge, I don't know, whatever. Everyone avenges me at some point. I have everyone's blessings. That's great. Listen, when I post crap on Facebook, I know I'm being dumb about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice that like I can have a back and forth with my friends.
Right. So Chris Freed would like to know, do you do graphic design in your day job? He says the artwork for your covers and most recently Will Swardstrom's Requiem are really fantastic.
Yeah, I do graphic art for money. Sometimes I hate it because, like, again, that's another thing where I kind of wanted to do it for fun, and I got good enough where I was making money on it. But I don't know. It's just some things I like to keep away from, like, other people. Like, some things I just want to keep for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you. Thank you. It's nice that people will enjoy things that I do. It's better than people telling you that you suck. That's definitely the better alternative than people telling you how bad you are.
We have several people wanting to know, what kind of shampoo do you use?
Oh, well, I'm like a shampoo whore.
Okay.
I don't use one particular brand. It's like whatever. It's kind of like when you go to the store, I'm going to try this flavor today or whatever food. So shampoos, it's like, oh, is that coconut and apple? Okay, cool. I'm going to try that. So it switches up between, like, I don't know, White Rain, which is like the ghetto shampoo. It's like cheap, but smells really nice. Or VO5. I don't know, whatever.
Terry Miller wants to know, does your writing power come from your luscious locks, and what would happen if you got a haircut?
The reason I have long hair is because I'm too lazy to get a haircut. It's not like a fashion statement. It's kind of like when I had my in my personal life, when my ex-girlfriend, like, when we broke up, and I was trying to be Mr. Pretty Boy, all attractive, and short hair and whatever. And it's like she left, and I just didn't cut my hair for like a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like the Forrest Gump thing. It's like, well, I made it this far. Let me go run halfway across the country. I was like, so I just went the distance, and, like, I just didn't cut my hair for 4 years. Like, there's no reason why. It's just like, okay, I don't know, why go get a haircut for who?
Right.
Yeah.
So for the last segment here at the Legendarium, we have what we call the legendary ending. So the first question for the legendary ending is, what songs are currently on your writing playlist?
Oh, what songs?
Or bands, whatever.
Okay, so I have iTunes, and I have 2 days worth of music on my iTunes, so I usually put it on shuffle. Okay. So it changes every day. So it's either you got the Guns N' Roses, or you got Slipknot, or you got Marilyn Manson, or you got System of a Down. Then you got your hip hop stuff, not the new crap. Like the old school stuff that I grew up listening to.
Right.
Then I will, depending on my mood, because when I write, I have to feel like a certain mood. So if I want to feel like sleazy or dirty or obnoxious, like, I'll put on a certain type of music. If I'm like Johnny Rangers, I listen to a lot of techno.
If you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse, which one of your book characters would you want to be stuck with?
Well, no one really knows any of the characters in my book, so I guess. I mean, like, okay, so I'm Not Dead. Charles Dudley is kind of like an alter ego of myself, I guess.
Okay.
But probably him, because, yeah, I don't know.
So if you could pick any character from any media source, comics, books, movies, regular books, television, whatever, who would you want to be stuck with?
Any character from any movie.
From any movie or comics or a B-movie, whatever. Who would you want to be stuck with?
In a zombie apocalypse?
Yep.
The Hulk.
The Hulk?
Yeah, I mean, how can you lose with the Hulk? That guy can wipe out like 1,000 zombies like that. Bam.
Right.
It's like Hulk smash. All right, goodbye. Just wipe out half, like, entire city street. Yeah, I mean, who else is there? Like, who would you pick?
Oh man, I've had several people say Superman. I think I might have to go with that.
Okay, fine, freaking Superman. That's like so. Okay, anyway, of course Superman. But the Hulk would be more fun. No, maybe not. I don't know. Listen, what can I tell you? I don't think about these things often. It's just if the zombie apocalypse was to happen. I don't know who you don't know. I don't know. I'd want to be with a woman. right? Like, wouldn't you want to be with like your chick or your wife?
Yeah.
And just like go out with a bang and like, I don't know, like, because I don't think in a situation like that you're gonna live for too long. You know, a zombie apocalypse, that you're done. It's not like Walking Dead. You're not gonna meet a group of people and like hunker down on a farm. No, you're gonna die in like 2 days. You are.
Yeah.
It's in New York City where there's like 12 million people. There's no surviving it. You're gonna die.
You can come here to where I live. We got 5,000 people in our town, so I got a better shot here.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'm not as fortunate as you. We're gonna be dead. We'll be dead. So the second I try to get out of my my town alone, I'm dead. So it's like, listen, babe, we're gonna die. We got probably a day or two. Let's just drink our faces off and make love and watch a good movie and hopefully get a pizza or something before someone kills us.
Right.
And that's it. Hopefully the Hulk will show up or Superman, but that's not gonna happen. So,
if you had a time machine, where would you travel and why?
Okay. I would really there's an era that I keep thinking about, like, because I've had this question asked before, or I asked myself. I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. But if I jumped in the time machine, wouldn't you love to go to Happy Days, like the 50s, where the greasers and like Back to the Future. Like, I love that movie just for the fact that he goes back to 1955.
Right.
That seemed like such a cool era. Like, it was the birth of rock and roll. Everyone's hanging out at like roller skating rinks or drive-ins and making out like on a hill, on a cliff somewhere, riding bicycles. It seems such a cool time to be in. Everyone's doing whatever dance Chuck Berry was, it just seemed like, honestly, if I had to think, let's say from the 50s to now, the 60s was getting like crazy. 70s was too crazy. The 80s it just kept it seemed like every decade just kept getting worse. And the 50s to me seemed like probably the last time it was just like things were kind of just really cool. I could be wrong. I mean, am I wrong?
I have no idea. I'm not a history buff, but
you weren't there in the 50s. So
I sure wasn't. No, I don't know.
That's why we need a time machine.
Yeah, that's why we need a time machine.
Because I could be wrong. It could have been like the worst time in American history, but because of media and TV has fooled us into thinking it was one of the cooler times.
Yeah.
And I would just be living a lie.
And then our final question is: a penguin walks through the door.
I don't. That's right. Don't even. Yeah, I don't know. Like that's such a strange question. Like, what would a penguin say?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I mean, like, what would they say? Like, I don't know. Like, and I feel bad because I've heard your other guests and they've had really good answers to this question.
Right.
Me, I'm just gonna blow it, and I'm sorry. And I'm sorry to have been such a disappointment for the show.
It's fine. So if our readers want to, one more question. Do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Okay. Well, if I was going to say, don't do anything that you don't enjoy doing, but that's a crock of shit, because sometimes you got to do stuff that you don't like doing just to get things done. Mm-hmm. But if you're a writer, you got to love what you do. You got to love it. And you have to accept, just like in anything else in life, you have to accept the bad with the good. You have to accept failure, because failure, there's a saying, if you're not winning, you're learning, and you just kind of have to stick to it, because there will be a time when you smash through that threshold and something will click, and it might not be on the timeline that you want it to happen, just because someone else got famous and sold his book rights to a movie studio in 2 years. That might not happen for you, but it could happen for you in 5 years. But the core of it, you have to love what you're doing. You have to stick with it. If it means that much to you, stick with it.
That's good advice. So where can our readers go if they want to learn more about you or your stories that you've written? There's
artiecabrera.com. I do have a website. On Twitter, it's also Artie Cabrera, no space in between the names. Well, what else do I have? I don't know. Facebook, of course, Artie Cabrera. The profile has a picture of a guy with long hair in the box. So if you're confused about, who you're looking for, that's me.
Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I had a good time, and hopefully I will see you soon.
Well, guys, that's all the time we've got for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us for 30-minute author interviews. I hope you come back next week when we have a brand new episode for you. And are you a subscriber to the Legendarium's newsletter? If not, head on over and get signed up. Each month you'll get exclusive news, exclusive updates, and an exclusive giveaway just from my newsletter subscribers. This month we're giving away a signed copy of 2 books from Ernie Howard, The Pool and The Summertime Stairs. And until next time, guys, have a good one and stay legendary. Hey guys, what's going on? Gotta re-record that.